Good morning, Don Keith on the Diary of a Psychotic podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Granger Supply, the ones who get it done. All right, coming up on the Memorial Day weekend, a lot of action. Indianapolis 500, coming off of the probably one of the biggest travel weeks in the year. Just be careful, okay? The airports have actually been reduced in the number of flights they can handle. All right. The FAA and the Department of Transportation has assured everyone that we'll be back up to speed in 3 or 4 years. Time keeps flowing like a river. Oh, good Lord. 3 or 4 years? We're not getting any younger. All right? I want everybody to realize that. All right? We're not getting any younger. All right? Now, all that aside, I want to talk about my philosophy professor and an exercise that he did in front of me when I was a little boy. No, I wasn't little. I wasn't little. I was in college. He came out with this big jar, right? And all of the freshmen, this was a freshman matriculation class because you had to take a humanities class for matriculating. Don't even ask what that's about. Well, anyway, wow. They don't even teach humanities anymore. Oh my God. Accreditation, what's that? You know? Regulations, what are those? You know? Critical thinking, what's that? Right, so... Here we go. Anyway, he comes out. All right. And he was also an English professor as well. His name was David Dutain. Long ago, he passed away like 30 years ago. But at any rate, this is what he did. He came out with a jar. All right. Then he took a bucket of golf balls and he poured them all into the jar. Right. And he said, "Is the jar full?" And everybody goes, "Yes." So everybody in the classroom goes, "Yes." Not me in the back. I went, not even close. Because I had already taken physics and chemistry and all the rest of those things like that. The other that teaches you about mass energy and conversion and all the rest of that. And I'm like, not even close. All right, so he takes some gravel. He takes a cup of gravel. He pours that in there and he shakes it around. And the gravel's in there now. And he says, "Is the jar full now?" He asked the class. And everybody goes, not me in the back. No, I'm a science student. Right? I'm like, no, it ain't even close. All right, because I was the only engineering student in the class. I was going to Northeastern Engineering School. At any rate, Huskies. That's what we're called, Huskies. Engineers are called Huskies. All right, now, my father-in-law was a Husky, but anyway, I digress. And my dad was a Husky, okay? But I digress a little bit further. Okay. Well, anyway, he takes a cup of sand and he pours the sand in there. Okay. And then he shakes it around. And now the jar is almost to the top. And he says, "Is the jar full?" I'm looking, I'm blinking. And everybody's like, doesn't answer. Nobody answers. Because the professor has taken out 2 beers. I think they were Budweisers or something like that. And he puts them out and he goes, opens one of the beers, puts the other beer out at the edge of the, there he says, he pours the beer in there. And the beer goes in. And the jar still got room, I could see, right, to pour some more beer in there, right? But he doesn't open the other beer. So I'm like looking. Who here is over 21? And I was the only freshman over 21. He goes, "Mr. Keith?" I raised my hand. He says, "Do you want to answer the question?" "The jar's not full, sir." He said, that isn't what I was going to ask everybody. Do you know what I was going to ask everybody? I'm like, wow, you've asked if the jar was full all this time. But you didn't fill it every single time, and it's still not full. So I thought you were going to ask everybody what, is the jar full? And I was going to say, not yet. And then what were you going to say? Then he had the impression, goes, what were you going to say? You have to pour the other beer in first. He says, Mr. Keith, are you over 21? Yep. Do you drink beer? I'm like, yes. Do you want to drink the other beer? Can I? Sure. He says, but I thought you would save it for somebody that you liked. I like you, Mr. Keith, and this is why. You knew the jar wasn't full every single time. He says, why? Because volume, no, not all that. Not all that. Where do you live, Mr. Keith? Out in Wayland. He says, okay. He says, do you drive in every night? Yes. He says, do you pay for the parking? Yes. Do you have trouble finding a place to park the car sometimes? Yes. Do you use the student lot? Yes, but it's starting to cost more. He says, Why are you going to college? So I can earn more money. Doing what? I want to be a communications engineer for a major market radio station. I said, oh, wow. Okay. So you want to further your career with your education? I'm like, yes. Now you're already an engineer? Yeah, I'm working with General Dynamics, and Jay says, stop you right there. He goes, why didn't you say the jar was full? Because the golf balls didn't fill the jar. He's like, right. He says, no, this is philosophy. So what am I doing here? You're teaching a philosophy lesson. And he's like, yes. Did you get the lesson, Mr. Keith? Mm-hmm. It's about life. I said, philosophy is about life. And he said, yes. He says, now. He says, what do the golf balls represent? The big stuff. And he's like, right. He says, what about the pebbles? Some of the other stuff that's also important. That's it, but it's also important. It took up more room. That's right. Okay, what about the sand? Didn't take up as much room. Doesn't take up as much room, but it's still there. Yeah. Now, what about the beers? What about them? He's like, oh, okay, yeah, okay. It didn't take you as much time to pour the beer in as it did for all that other stuff. That's right. He said, what do you get from that lesson? Well, my uncle always says, don't sweat the little stuff. You're getting there. You're getting there, Mr. Keith. How old are you? 26? How old are everybody here? 18, 19, blah, blah. Get me 20, not even 20 years old yet. Not old enough to drink. He says, come and get your beer, Mr. Keith. I came over there and get it. All the rest of the kids are like, they were into partying off campus and stuff, and it's not legal to drink at their age. So, he says, so the professor, he got out another beer. He says, you know what, Mr. Keith, you're pretty cool. And everybody's like going, they're like going, what do you like him for? And he says, cheers. And we tap the cheers. He says, do you think anybody else here got the lesson? I'm like, yeah, okay, the lesson. He says, did you get the lesson? And I looked around and I said, and I remember George went in cheers. And I said, you can take care of the golf balls and you can sometimes take care of the pebbles, but the sand is not that important. Okay? Doesn't take up that much room. It's not that important. It's just the important stuff is the golf balls and the gravel, the heavy things. He says, but you want to know what? This is pretty cool because I had the time in the class to have a beer with you. And he's like, that's right. He's just because life is hard, he says, and very full. It still doesn't mean you don't have a time to have a beer with a friend. Cheers. Cheers, everybody. Rest in peace, George. This has been Don Keith, The Diary of a Psychotic podcast, brought to you by Granger Supply, the ones who get it done.